Hello, I'm Marcus Grodi. Welcome to the 5th episode of the Science Before Science, a guide to thinking and believing. I'm here with noted physicist Professor Anthony Rizzi, the director of the Institute for Advanced Physics. He is our guide in firming up the foundations of our thinking. In our first episode, we saw how the deep decay of our culture calls us to return to truth. In the second, we found we need both knowledge and belief, as a bird needs two wings to soar. The third showed us that knowledge comes before belief, and that as men, our knowledge comes through the senses. The last episode was about the proof of the human soul and the nature of man. What can be left? Well, a whole lot. We're still just in the first half of your book, Dr. Rizzi. A natural question comes up now that we know what thinking is for a man. That question is, can animals also think?
That is something very much discussed today. You know, legal rights have been given to monkeys and apes and even rats.
We have a clip on screen of you talking to a child about what an animal is, which will help us understand whether animals actually think.
So are dogs and cats the same thing?
No.
And so why not?
I don't know.
Are they both animals?
Yes.
So they're the same.
One little thing is different.
Are there any other animals?
Yes, deer, birds, all kinds of things.
Are they animals because they're all the same size?
No.
How about because they all have eyes?
No.
Can they be real tiny and still be animals, like little buggies when you look under the microscope?
Yes.
So what makes them an animal then? What's the same about all those things?
They have a mind of some kind.
Do rocks think?
No, they don't have a mind.
Is the tree in your backyard an animal?
No.
So animals have a mind.
Yes, a mind, some sort of kind.
Is that what makes them an animal?
Yes.
What kind of mind is it?
I don't know.
Is it a mind like ours?
No.
So animals don't have to have eyes. Do they have to have ears?
No.
Okay, let's say it doesn't have any ears or nose or a mouth or eyes. Then how does it know anything?
It feels.
It feels. Very good. So how come those little buggies under the microscope are animals?
Because they have minds.
You don't see a mind. What do you see when you look at them?
You can see buggies crawling around.
So how do you know they're animals then?
You see them crawling around.
So how do you know they're not plants?
Because plants don't move.
So all animals move?
Right.
So let's go back to the microscope. Can they see or hear or smell anything, those little buggies?
Some of them can't even taste.
So why are they an animal?
Because they can feel.
Is everything that moves an animal?
No.
How do you know if something moves that it's an animal?
Okay, nothing else moves except animals.
Okay, you hit a baseball and it moves, right? And the earth moves around the sun. They aren't alive, are they?
It needs to have legs.
So a worm's not an animal?
They must have little tiny legs.
No.
Okay, it has to move by itself to be an animal, and you are an animal.
Animals move and think in some way, but not like us. But some people challenge this, at least in a vague way. There's a long study with a gorilla called Coco. You may have heard of it. Coco can read sign language and apparently paint pictures.
Well, how can he do that?
Well, it's what we've discussed before, sensorial knowledge. It can touch, see, hear, feel, smell, and taste.
So Coco really knows, but only particulars.
Yeah. He knows the banana that he's eating right now, but doesn't know the general idea of a banana. It's this banana that has this temperature, this amount of brown and yellow, and this amount of sweetness and sourness that makes this particular splat when I drop it.
Coco even drew this painting, which you can now see. He named it Stink Gorilla More, which is supposed to be a bunch of flowers. Supposedly his sign for stink means flower. Well, can he dream?
Yeah, he has an imagination and can dream because he can recall sense experiences. Because he can recall, he can connect one thing with another, though he doesn't understand them or the connections. He just doesn't understand.
How is that so?
Well, a good analogy is that a mother can teach her toddler, for example, to turn off the oven. Now, I'm not recommending that you try this, but she could teach her to turn it off when the roast is done. For example, she can tell her, when you see this red light, press this button over here. Now she can watch her mother and imitate her actions, even though she may not understand any of it, what it means to cook a roast. Now this is the state of animals about everything.
I recommend that you look at Dr. Rizzi's book to learn more about all the things we've been talking about in this series. But this segment is particularly interesting. It really brings home the importance and deepens the understanding of the material in the earlier episodes. Dr. Rizzi, you have several stories about animal intelligence in the book. You talk about a famous horse in the early 1900s which fooled many, including experts, into thinking it was intelligent. They thought the horse, which was named Hans, could add, subtract, multiply, divide, read, and even spell, and even solve problems in musical harmony. Apparently it communicated by tapping its feet.
Yeah, the people that study animals found Hans was exhibiting a phenomenon that they now call cueing, which is also known as the clever Hans phenomenon, after Hans the horse.
So was it a fraud? How did he do it?
No, in fact, neither the owner nor anyone else understood what was happening at the time. The animal was actually picking up subtle cues that the audience and those around it were inadvertently giving it. And these cues were imperceptible to almost everybody.
So the animal was in a way smarter than the people.
Yeah, in a way, its sensorial knowledge is so highly developed. You might compare the sensorial ability of animals like Coco and Hans to the ability of a blind man to pick up on certain sounds and smells and so on that the rest of us would completely miss.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I have a suspicion that this was the inspiration for a famous TV show about a horse.
Of course.
So how can we tell whether an animal is intelligent or whether it's just horsing around with us?
Indeed, how?
One of the most effective ways is what I call the dictionary way of learning. It relies on the fact that intelligence is about meaning. Only man knows what things mean, what they are. It's called the dictionary method because in the dictionary we learn the meaning of a word by other words. In this way, one gets a meaning from other meanings. It's like the difference between the mother showing her daughter in the kitchen how and when to turn on the oven by actually doing it in front of her, and on the other hand, explaining it to her in a different room. In the first case, mere imitation can easily occur, whereas in the second, it's nearly impossible that the daughter would be able to do it unless she really understands the meanings of the words.
Let's screen up now. We have an example from your book of the dictionary method. In it, the son has never seen a wallet before and does not know the meaning of the word.
Giuseppe, do you know what a wallet is?
No.
Well, it's a small container that people carry money and cards in, and it's small enough to stick in your pocket. Do you understand?
Yep.
Okay, let me show you something here. Do you know what this is?
A wallet.
Very good. Do you know angular momentum?
What?
Never mind.
Dr. Rizzi, what about artificial intelligent devices? What are they? If animals cannot think, maybe these can. After all, we make the devices and we have intelligence.
Yes, there's much to talk about here. This is a very important point, actually, today, especially because of all our advances in technologies and computers. As you know, Marcus, a 3-year-old computer is practically a Stone Age device. There even have been computers that now that have beat top-level chess masters. One such computer, I believe called Deep Blue, is we have a picture of on screen.
You mentioned the Turing test in your book. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, a Turing test, named after the famous mathematician, is supposedly a way of testing to see whether you have a human intelligence in front of you or not. Imagine that you're listening to a voice over a speaker and you're asked to determine whether the voice is animated by human intelligence or not.
So if you are fooled into thinking it's a human being, and in fact it's really a computer, then you have made artificial intelligence?
Yes, this is the idea of the Turing test. And artificial is the key word. Remember, by definition, we are trying to make something that imitates human intelligence, not that is human intelligence. It does not, by the fact that it can imitate it, mean that it actually has human intelligence. Remember, human intelligence is an immaterial power to know the essence of things.
How about an example to help us understand this?
On screen now we see a young boy reading Shakespeare. Notice how he reads so flawlessly. This obviously does not mean that he understands any of what it means, yet listen to all the meaning that is in the passage.
But soft what light through yonder window breaks. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she.
It's knowing what the meaning of the words and the sentences are that demands an intellect, not speaking them.
So it seems we are ready to define an animal, a man and a robot.
Yeah, so let's do it. A robot is something designed to imitate a man or to do certain useful functions that, for example, man would otherwise do himself. An animal is a being, a substance, something that is, which has sensorial knowledge. That is the ability to know by, for example, touching. A man is a rational animal, that is, he has an intellect, and is not just able to know this color, but to know color in general. Not just this feeling, but what the thing is that's making that feeling. He has the ability to know things that have no size, no shape, no color, nor any other material property. He has a non-material soul.
So we are gradually seeing how our word fits together. It would be helpful to look at beginnings and ends. Those are always very informative. How does a man begin?
Here again we see the importance of the science before science, for this takes us into the question of whether an embryo is human or not, which of course decides the magnitude of the important question of abortion.
What's the best way to think about all this?
Well, at this point we need to apply the principles learned in the science before modern science to things that we've learned in modern science. On the screen we see a living embryo dividing. We now know that the embryo maintains itself and controls its own growth and development process, independent of the mother. The mother provides only food and environment in analogy to what she will do after birth. On screen we see that we have an unborn child. We now see a newborn baby. Clearly this is a human being. At some point he will talk, read, write, laugh, cry, and exercise all the faculties given to man. How could an embryo become this? Remember, the mother only provided nourishment and did not change the embryo in any way. Now nothing can change itself because that would mean that it was giving itself something it didn't have. So if the embryo was not already human from the beginning, then either it was not one thing or it would never be human. We know that the embryo does become human, which means the embryo must have been human to begin with.
What about the option that the embryo is not one thing?
Well, on screen we see again the picture of the embryo dividing. It's clear that this is one organism, and no biologist denies this.
So, can the embryo think?
Well, the embryo has the power to think, but the body is not disposed enough for him to abstract yet. There is much to be said here that we can't cover due to time. But let me just say that it is very interesting. When the sperm unites with the egg in any animal, a new being comes into existence.
What about the soul?
The soul is the form of the body. That is, it's the actuality that makes the body to be the body. At the point of conception, God simultaneously creates and infuses the soul of the man. The soul, being non-material, cannot come from material, remember. Remember, for something not in the material, i.e., we call it immaterial,